Hello students, welcome to Future IAS. So as today we are going to start a very important topic of Indian modern history, that is Indian National Congress, and in this chapter we will cover the moderate phase. Right? Moderate phase means the phase of those earlier leaders who fought against colonial rule in the interest of Indian masses. So here we are going to covering that thing, Indian National Modern Congress, right? So here basically we will cover the phase of 1885 to 1905. We will cover all these things, right? So first of all, we will cover the Indian National Congress phase, how it formed, over those persons who contributed behind the formation of Indian National Congress and who were the earlier leaders in the Congress who played an important role in the formation of Indian National Congress, and later they exposed the Britishers' policies. So basically we'll cover all the achievements, the issues, the problems with moderates, why they called moderates, what are their methodologies. So all these things we are going to covering in this topic, right? So let's begin today's topic of Indian modern history, and that is, so basically the content which we are going to covering here, that is how the foundation of INC laid, right? So generally Indian National Congress, the abbreviation is called INC, right? So INC, you need not to write always Indian National Congress. So for example, if you are writing in your mains about Indian National Congress, then first time once you have to write, and in the bracket you can write this one, INC, and later you in the later things you can use INC in your answer, so that examiner understood. So foundation of Indian National Congress basically we are covering. So what are those situations which led to the formation of Congress? So first of all, in the previous lecture we have taken a chapter, the growth of nationalism in India, the growth of modern nationalism in India. Okay, so in that chapter we have covered pre-Congress political organization, right? So those political organization which formed before the formation of INC, and in other words we can say that these pre-Congress political organization paved the path towards the formation of Indian National Congress, right? So basically some Britishers had played an important role in the formation of INC. What are those? And many historians, by Indian historians, their rule had been seen in a suspicion way. So what exactly that phase? So in this way we will cover all these things, why their role has been seen as a suspicion, right? Why they were considered as suspicious, right? So basically the first reason, foundation of Indian National Congress, the very first thing is that Indian National Congress is directly outcome of nationalist, yeah, you can write nationalism, right? Next, pre-Congress political organization played an important role in the formation of INC, right? So here some things are very important. So in technically words, if you want to write, you can quote these things that in the later 1870s and early 1880s, these 2 years means the time period between 1870 to 1880. You know, in history basically, year is very important. Some dates are very important, like 1757, 1885, 1905, 1944, 1947, 1942, 1920. So some years are really very relevant, and those years are very important. Why? In what sense? In what context? Because they made some changes. Either they created some new, or they deleted or abolished some old, right? So this was main thing. Just like 1857, 1858 are the relevant years from Indian modern history point of view, right? Because this is also a transition phase which turned towards something new. Means this was that phase where something new happened basically, right? So here we are going to covering. So when you will start with the 1870 and the early 1880s. A solid ground had been prepared, right? Because already there were so many political organizations came into existence, right? And those played very important role. How? Because later INC emerged, the complete result of all these, because this is the political consciousness among the middle class intelligentsia, right? And this was really relevant year because it played these 10 years played a relevant grounds, a solid ground had been prepared for the establishment of an all India organization. Although regionally based, right? Some political organization were existed in Bengal, some were existed in Madras, some were existed in Punjab, Maharashtra, Bombay. So in this way, various organizations were existed on the basis of reason, right? So all the pre-Congress political organizations were regional in character. Now, when a nationalism has been immersed to a large extent or in a full faith, then they realized that we should establish something which is on the national basis. This was that feeling which played an important role in the formation of an all India organization, that there must be something which is national in character, which represented the national interest, which represented the interests of masses of Bengal, and means all India based. You can now got it, right? So basically, you must have heard about this thing. When these types of political organizations have been emerging all around the India, then Britishers also became alerted, right? And in this alertness, a British ex-civil servant, A.O. Hume, he convinced Lord Dufferin at that time that Indians should be endowed with some all India political organization. Otherwise, in the absence of that all India organization, Indians can revolt against British rule. It can be resulted in a great revolt, right? So A.O. Hume, although the role of A.O. Hume is evaluated in a positive sense, but some safety valve theory worked behind this, propounded by Lala Lajpat Rai. We'll discuss also here right now after this. So some safety valve doctrine has been propounded by various moderate leaders who considered the role of A.O. Hume, that why there is a need, if Britishers were doing ruling on us, then why a Britisher became so friendly with Indians, right? Means, and without any selflessness, right? So how can be it possible? So his role is always expected as a suspicious, right? So we are not going on that part. So first of all, you have to understand, right? And in this way, the final shape of this idea, when Indians have realized that they must, now they were in the need of something which is an all India in character. When these ideas were discussed, A.O. Hume basically made a meeting with all India leaders, and he suggested them that they should establish some all India Congress, right? So what was that name? We'll discuss each and everything. And in this way, this idea was given the final shape, right? Was given by a retired English civil servant, A.O. Hume. So A.O. Hume was also the first secretary of INC, right? It's all right. So A.O. Hume mobilized leading intellectuals of the time. So he mobilized, he basically called the Indian leaders for a meeting. Okay. He just wanted to give some directions to Indians, that how they should work, in which direction they should work. So all these things have been discussed by A.O. Hume, right? So A.O. Hume mobilized leading intellectuals of that time, means who were playing a good role at that time, means who emerged in the form of leadership at that time, right? Like Dada Bhai Naroji, Firoz Shah Mehta, Umesh Chandra Banerjee. So all these persons were in a great role at that time. So they were the hero of that moment, right? So A.O. Hume recognized these persons and called for a meeting, right? And in that meeting, and with the cooperations of these intellectuals, they organized the first session of Indian National Congress, right? Basically, this was the first session at Gokul Das Tejpal Sanskrit College in Bombay in December 1885, right? So here I mean to say that Indian National Congress at Gokul Das, this is a fact basically, right? So this is a fact. The earlier name A.O. Hume, basically the very beginning, this name was not in the starting Indian National Congress. Basically, the starting name when A.O. Hume mobilized, this is called Indian National Union. Indian National Union. Starting name Indian National union, right? Later, the union word is replaced by Congress. Replaced by Congress. And who named this? This name, Indian National Congress. This name means nominations. This nomination, Namkaran, this nomination done by Dadabhai Naoroji. Dadabhai Naoroji, and he is known Grand Old Man of India. Grand Old Man of India. Right? So basically, the word Congress has been taken from America. This has been taken from USA, right? And you know, American Parliament is known as Congress, right? And Congress consists of Senate and House of Representatives, right? And in this way, the nominations was done by Dadabhai Naoroji. So initiate name was, starting name was Indian National Union. Is that clear to you? Right? And this was the place, Gokul Das Sant Tejpal Sanskrit College, and it was Bombay. Basically, one more interesting fact about this meeting is that the first venue where the first session was conducted, initially the venue was decided by A.O. Hume, Pune, at Pune, that they will conduct the first session at Pune. But what happened at that time, Pune was suffered from plague, basically at that time. Suffered from plague, sorry. Right? The plague disease was spreading here, just like in today's, you can see corona is spreading in that way. So at that time, plague was spreading, right? And that's why the first, if plague was not there, then it became history. Then what we will read, then we will study that in Pune. Means venue will be something else, right? So here, when the disease was witnessed there, then the venue was placed by A.O. Hume and the meeting or the session was called at Bombay, right? And who was the first president? Later we will cover all these things also, right? So are you getting my viewpoint, dear students? What's your views? What do you think? Are you getting these? These are really very easy things. Huh? Right. So first thing, I think you have clear. And as a prelude to this, 2 sessions of the Indian National Conference had been held in 1883 and 1885, right? And which were really very relevant, right? So initially, so 1885, and the date is also on 28th December. The date is 28th December. So first thing you will memorize in this way some facts you will also, because questions are coming from this, but right now questions will not come because the scenario or the situations around us which is happening, that is totally anti-Congress, right? So maybe questions will not be framed out, right? Okay, guys. So next we are going. So let's see what the next. So here is the next. Surendra Nath Banerjee and Anand Mohan Bose were the main architects of the INC conference, and later in 1885 this became Congress, right? Surendra Nath Banerjee, and one thing you know, Anand Mohan Bose also became the captain of, later he became the captain of INC, Indian National Army, INA, Azad Hind Fauj. Okay, but later he was replaced by Subhash Chandra Bose, who reorganized Azad Hind Fauj in a more strengthened way, right? Next, the first session of the Indian National Congress was attended by 72 delegates and presided by Vyomesh Chandra Banerjee. In short form, we also know him as Vyomesh Chandra Banerjee. You're getting? Okay? So these are the main things. Many times you can be asked that consider the following personalities regarding their contribution to which of the following, right? So in this way, UPSC can ask anything from you, right? Next, so in this way, what was the scheme plan or timetable? What type of timetable was decided? Just like you decided your timetable that I will wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning and will read towards current affairs, then we'll eat breakfast, half an hour, then again I will start notes, 2 hours, we'll go for class, then we'll do from 1 to 3 p.m. history, 3 to 5 p.m. polity, 7 to 9 economics, then 9 to 11 geography, and miscellaneous. So this is the timetable generally students show me that ma'am we have created such a nice, right? So always students asked me about timetable, ma'am, what is right timetable? And I always say that only that timetable is right which you can follow regularly. If there is consistency and if there is continuity, because continuity is the key which became the reason for your success. If you are creating a good timetable and you are not following, that means only that timetable is good which you brought into implementation. So if you are making that timetable, follow that too, not according to you. For we are creating timetable according to us, then we are following also that according to us. Suppose we are skipping, suppose in the timetable we have written 1, 2, 3, I have to study history, but many times we got sleepy and then we decided that today I will follow this, instead of 1 I will do from 3 itself. So what is this? So don't make very strict timetable, make very flexible 21 or 2 hours, it can be up and down, but always try to follow that timetable. So become the habitual of that timetable. If you will not brought that timetable into your practice, into your practical form, so you have to give basically the practical shape to that timetable. Only then you can, right? So in this way. Next. So the timetable is that Congress will meet every year in December in a different part of country each time. December is a different part of our country. It's winter season. So here means December of every year. December of every year is considered annual session, is known for annual session. So, and in history there are some special sessions too, right? What about those? So in 1885 it was decided that we will conduct our annual session in the month of December of every year, right? But if circumstances stands to do some work on that particular month, either it may be March, May. So other than December, if Congress is conducting its sessions, it is called as special session, right? So here I mean to say that the sessions of Congress are divided into two parts. Annual, simply annual sessions are in December of every year, and the second one, special session, which can be in any month. Okay, other than December, it can be called as special session. Is that clear to you? Right, guys? Okay, and some great presidents of Congress during this early phase were Dadabhai Naoroji. So these were the moderates. Dadabhai Naoroji, who became thrice president, means 3 times he occupied the position of president for INC. Badruddin Tayyabji, means these are those diamonds. These are those diamond personalities, those diamond Indians, means now it's quite impossible, like the birth of these types of diamond personalities. Is that clear to you? Next, Badruddin Tayyabji, Firoz Shah Mehta, P. Anand Chalu, Surendra Nath Banerjee, Jomesh Chandra, R.C. Dutt, right? R.C. Dutt, if you have heard about his name, Anand Mohan Bose and Gopal Krishna Gokhale. So these were the moderate leaders. Yes, guys. So we're talking about the annual sessions. The speciality, what is the difference between annual sessions of Congress and the special sessions of the Congress, right? For example, if it is happening other than in December, in September, in October, in March, or in February, so if it is happening in any month other than December, then it will be considered as special sessions. Later, in the later coming phase, some changes, some modifications were made in the Constitution of Congress, and a Congress working committee, means a 15-member Congress working committee will be formed, okay, which do important things on behalf of the entire Congress party. And later all these decisions were put before Congress in the annual sessions, right? So in this way some work were made easy, and in the next coming chapters I will explain that thing in front of you. Is that clear to you? And the next one is, so these are the prominent leaders, other prominent leaders. So you just know to know each and every person, prominent leaders. And these persons were non-moderates because their policies were liberal. Just because of moderates or liberals are the same things, right? And other prominent leaders included M.G. Ranade, Mahadev Govind Ranade, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Shishir Kumar Ghosh, Motilal Ghosh, Madan Mohan Malviya, G. Subramanyam Iyer, C. Vijay Raghavachari, Dinshai Vacha, right? So now you will say to me, ma'am, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bal Pal Lal, they were the extremist leaders, but earlier they were in the moderate phase. But in 1907, Lal, Pal, Bal, a split occurred between these leaders, and in this way the Congress was divided into two parts. The moderates means liberals or extremists, right? In this way. And in 1890, Kadambini Ganguly, the first women graduate of Calcutta University, addressed the Congress session. So she was the first woman. She was not the first woman president. Okay. So if UPSC asked a question, he already asked about women president. So now I will going to discuss a few facts about women. So here you will keep these things in your mind. If I talk about women president, so first women graduate addressed, she is Kadambini Ganguly in 1890. And if I'm talking about women president, if I talk first lady president, then your answer is Annie Besant. Who was basically an Irish. She came from Ireland. And in 1917, at Bombay session, Calcutta session, she became the first lady president of INC. First lady who addressed Kadambini Ganguly, first fact. Second fact, first lady president. And next thing, first Indian lady. First Indian lady president. Then your answer will be 1924 Kanpur session. Sarojini Naidu. Sarojini Naidu. First women graduate, Kadambini Ganguly. First lady president, Annie Besant, Irish. First Indian lady president, Sarojini Naidu, 1924 Kanpur session. Is that clear to you? Okay. So in this way questions are asked. So you have to understand the role of women's too. Right, guys? So these are some important things. Otherwise, there is no need to cram all the presidents. No need. Some first, who was last, and what are the special sessions, and role about women, and who was the first European, Yule. And in this way you will keep some things, some points in your mind so that you can crack. So you will read all these things. Next, it symbolized. So what was the main objective? INC. Commitment. It symbolized the commitment, the freedom struggle to give the women of India their due status in national life. Right? So, freedom struggle. So, their main commitment was the freedom struggle, that they will fight for. Apart from means here they will also took the women participation also. So here women participation also equally was equally given importance. Was equally given importance. Next, and apart from the Indian National Congress, nationalist activity was carried out through provincial conference and associations, newspapers and literatures. So all these things were basically approved by Congress. Means pre-approval was mandatory. Means for everything approval of INC was mandatory. Only then they can initiate for Next thing, was it a safety valve? Safety valve, what it means, safety valve? What is the meaning of safety valve? Means the role of A.O. Hume is considered as a suspicion. It was not a trustworthy. Means some moderate leaders objected over the role played by A.O. Hume. They objected and they gave a theory. There is a theory of safety valve regarding the role of Hume. There is a theory that Hume formed the Congress with the idea that it would prove to be a safety valve for releasing the growing discontent of the Indians. So that means nationalistic feelings were emerging in Indians, and it can do any big explosion in the form of any revolt or any moment, and it can later become a threat to British rule. So before that could be taken place, they have created some safety valves for themselves, and they engaged all Indian leaders into a political platform, and that's why it is considered as a safety valve doctrine. Why? And just to stop Indians from any further revolt, they created a political platform, and in order to end the nationalist thinking in the minds of the Indian people, he convinced, means Hume, Lord Dufferin. Lord Dufferin was the then Viceroy of India. When Congress was formed, Viceroy was Lord Dufferin. Means, as the name itself, Duffer, means Lord Duffer, right? So Lord Duffer, not to obstruct the formation of Congress, right? The extremist leaders here, basically Lala Lajpat Rai, believed in the safety valve theory because some radical thinking leaders were in the Congress, and they objected that why A.O. Hume and Lord Dufferin is so interested. Means what is their hidden agenda behind this? Means it can be a propaganda. So all these things came in the minds of some extremist leaders, and they objected over it. And even the Marxist historians' conspiracy theory was an offspring of the safety valve notion, right? Offspring means result, outcome, right? And for example, R.P. Dutt opined, he has given his opinion that Indian National Congress was born out of a conspiracy to abort a popular uprising in India, and the bourgeois leaders were a party to it. What is the meaning of bourgeois? Bourgeois is basically a Marxist term. Used for capitalist. Means something exploitative system. Something exploitation means a group of those persons who are owners of a big land and who were exploiting the workers. And modern Indian historians disputed the idea of safety valve. And what about their opinion? Their opinion is that Indian National Congress represented the urge of politically conscious Indians to set up a national body to express the political and economic demands for India. but a few leaders were of the opinion that it is not at all a conspiracy, a propaganda, or a safety valve doctrine. Either it is a national platform created by Indians just to express their political and economic demands so that they can represent mass interests, right? So in this way, the things were interpreted, right? So these were basically the theories behind the formation of Congress party. So in this way, you have understood all these things. I think this is very easy. You can get it very well. Is that clear to you? Next. And if the Indians had convened such a body on their own, means why they are helping us? We can create it at our own. So it can be surmountable. It can be suspicious. In what way? From the officials, such an organization would not have been allowed to form. Means some officials, some British officials have taken some objections regarding this. That why there is a need some political platform. Here basically we can't say that leaders did not do good things, although according to the scenario, the situation, the circumstances which were at that time, they were sufficient, and according to them, so if we have got a national platform in 1885, then it's too late. 1947 means more than 60 years. Means Congress took 60 years to make India free from the British rule. So this was the weaknesses or the issues we can consider. Is that clear to you? Right? So these types of objections also, and later Dufferin also criticized, and many times Indian National Congress in the next coming phases, Indian National Congress will be declared as an illegal organization, that it must be banned, it is illegal. Okay, there is no authenticity or legacy behind this. It's not valid, right? And in the circumstances like Bipin Chandra, who is Indian historians, what do you say about? You can quote these types of historians in your answer so that examiner would convince that definitely you must have read some good book. Okay, it means you are a good student too, right? So all these things basically, right? And what he said that the early Congress leaders used Hume as a lightning conductor. That is, as a catalyst to bring together the nationalist forces, even if under the guise of a safety valve. So this is a liberal perspective represented by Bipin Chandra, right? What he said that means Indians just utilized Hume. They just indulged him with themselves so that Britishers would not suspect over their loyalty and other things. So in this way, Hume's role could not be seen in a suspicious situations, right? And so this situation explains in a liberal way that nothing is wrong when Hume is cooperating with the Indians. Indians have took the cooperation of Hume, right? So these both perspectives are correct one, and so we should try to focus only on the positive aspect of everything. If we will look the negatives, we should overlook, because negative things are never result oriented. They are just leading us towards failure, right? So always put your energy, put your focus on the positive aspects, because positive things are always result oriented. For example, if you're facing any challenges, or if anyone is demotivating to you, then you should not think you have started preparation, but someone is saying to you that you can't do this, and someone saying you can do. So don't think too much on the negative aspects. Always think about the positive, because positive things are always result oriented, and definitely they will give you some results, right? You have to put a good amount of labor, hard work in your preparation. Definitely you will make it in the final list, right? So this is for today, for this slides. Next we will cover. Now we are moving aims and objectives of the Congress. So these were the demands basically. The main aims you can say, demands you can say, right? So when this platform became, so on this platform, all the political leaders, freedom fighters have started demanding from Britishers. So here we are talking about the demands made by INC, International Congress. First demand was the main aims of INC in initial stage were to found a democratic nationalist movement. Next, politicize and politically educate people, means political awareness. People should aware about their rights. To establish the headquarters for a movement. INC is always a political platform. Promote friendly relations among nationalist political workers from different parts of the country. So here the talk of national integrity was made. They were talking about the national integrity. Right? So national integrity, national integration was given focus. Next, develop and propagate an anti-colonial nationalist ideology. Like if we are focusing on the nationalism, if we are talking about the liberty, we are talking about democracy, equality. These were the anti-colonial nationalist ideologies, because they protested against, they opposites. To formulate and present popular demands before the government with a view to unifying the people over a common and economic political program. Means they also talk about welfaring policies, which focused on the employment, development of modern industries, growth of handicrafts and cottage industries, indigenous industries, develop and consolidate a feeling of national unity among people irrespective of religion, caste and province, and carefully promote and nurture Indian nationhood. Means they wanted to create India as a nation. In yesterday class, I have already explained to you the concept of nationalism and what is nation state, what are the reasons, what are the characteristics, why we consider. So all these things we have already discussed. Is that clear to you? Right? So now next we are moving. What will be the next? So here Era of moderates, basically we are going to start now. Era of moderates, right? First of all, we'll talk about some important leaders, and this era was from 1885 to 1905. Okay, so in 1905, basically what happened in the next class, in the next lecture, I will take all the relevant events. So here we are talking about moderates. It is something, right? So when in 1905, partition of Bengal took place and Swadeshi movement emerged. When Swadeshi movement emerged, which is considered very important moment, pre-Gandhian, all India movement, but it's and the most successful also, right? So when the programs and the schemes were formulating for the Swadeshi movement, some differences occurred in the ideologies of moderates and extremists, and in the 1907 Surat split, they separated from the Congress, right? So here important leaders, the national leaders like Dadabhai Naroji, Mehta, D. Vacha, Dinshai Vacha, W.C. Banerjee, S.N. Banerjee, who dominated the Congress policies during the early period. So they represented the policies of early phase. Starting means they are basically representing some constitutional measures. In their methodology was not to protest directly, but through petition, and constitutional methodologies were basically their techniques, which remained as a failure to a large extent. So they were representing basically Congress policies at the beginning. And they were staunch believers in liberalism. They were the followers of liberalism, means liberal methodologies, means something kindness, something in the form of prayer, petition, pamphlets. They were just writing letters to British governors, right? British government, and they were demanding that do this, conduct the civil services exams in India, reduce this taxation, reduce that taxation. So all these things are happening just on the paperwork. There was nothing practically. Why? Because they were moderate. They were the staunch believers in liberalism. They were the liberals. And what the liberals? They were totally against the violence. They don't believe in the radical methodologies. They don't believe in the movements. They don't believe, but later, although they did, but initially they were the just followers of the liberal paths, prayer, petition, pamphlets, this, that. And that's why they were called as moderate politics. So this was the first phase, the moderate politics phase, and came to be labeled as moderates to distinguish from neo-nationalists. But there was such a radical ideological group having extremists, and they were also called neo-nationalists of early 20th century, who were referred to as extremists. Extremist means they don't believe in the methodology of prayer and petition. They believe that you should protest directly. You should conduct some radical movements against in the overthrowing of colonial rule. Is that clear to you? Right? Next. So moderate approach basically. So here you can also consider the issues. So whatever their approach, the issues too, right? Issues. If you have gone through the syllabus, you must know one thing. The Indian history from mid 18th till present. All the important personalities, events, and issues. Basically, three things we need to focus on these things. Okay. So issue. So issue here means what are the problems with moderates? What were the issues with them? Right. So why they didn't move for a direct movement? Why they were sending petitions and prayers to British rules, right? So in this way, although what were the weaknesses at that time? So moderate approach. Here I am talking about the moderate political activity involved constitutional agitation, means they are protesting, not directly. They were protesting. Their methodology was constitutional, means where they were sending letters, through letters, prayer they were sending petitions, right? Means in the form of request, they were doing request. Why? Because they believed that Britishers were benevolent, means having some liberal attitudes. They will definitely think about ourselves. We'll do, then definitely they'll do, right? So they believed in the benevolency of Britishers. Means benevolency means having some welfaring tendencies, right? So all these things basically were thought about by moderates, and the moderates believed that the British basically wanted to be just to the Indians. Means they considered that Britishers will do justice with Indians. Means such types of misunderstanding, but were not aware of the real conditions. But they don't know the devil which reside in every Britishers. They could not identify that devil. If public opinion could be created in the country and public demands be presented to the government through resolutions, petitions, meetings, and the authorities would concede these demands gradually. So this type of trust made by these moderates on Britishers. So in this way, they were of the thinking that Britishers are educated, they were lenient, they are do justice with Indians, and if we will send petitions, prayers in form of our demands, definitely they will consider it gradually, right? So these types of blind trust, and they were not aware about the devils, right? And to achieve these ends means final aim, means demands, means our demands. Ends means here demands, what we want actually. For example, to become a civil servant, it's your end. So end means your final destination, right? And they worked on a two-pronged methodology. So this was the methodology. First, create a strong public opinion, right? Create a public opinion. If public will say in that directions that we should move or we should work in the national spirit, and then educate and unite people on a common political question. So here, create a strong public opinion was the main methodology. That's why they have started printing papers, pamphlets, magazines, articles, newspapers, In this way, they have started publishing, right? So in order to create a strong public opinion, printing was started. Next. And the next one is to introduce reforms in India on the lines laid out by nationalists. Means some reforms must be there. They also exposed economic exploitation which was made by Britishers at that time. Is that clear to you? Right, guys? So these were the two methodology, right? That they will persuade the British government and British public opinion to introduce reforms. Means forcefully. They will compel that British government how to do. Right? They will compel through their petitions, prayers, public meetings, and through public opinions. So this was the trust. Next, they use the method of prayer and petition. I have already explained. And if that failed, they resorted to constitutional agitation. That they became on a dharna pradarshan. They have starting agitation, right? And a British committee of the Indian National Congress was established in London in 1899, which had India as its organ. In this way. Is that clear to you? Next. Here role of grand old man. They spent a substantial portion of his life and incoming campaigning for India's case abroad. And in 1890s, it was decided to hold a session of INC in London in 1892, but it could not take place. But there was British election time, and that's why in 1891 the proposal was postponed and never revived later, right? So this was decided so that they can made aware to all Britain about India's interest. Although here you can consider the role played by moderates. It's really appreciable. It's really good efforts made by them, right? And the moderates leaders believed that political connections with Britain were in India's interest at that stage of history, and that time was not ripe for a direct challenge to the British rule, right? Dada Bhai Naroji was also elected for British Parliament for the House of Commons, right? Is that clear to you? And you also focus on some points that you should work on some personalities, what types of books they have written, and with the, whom they connected. Means you have to find out some connections with international personality too, like the role of Majini and all that, right? So in this way you have to keep focus. Is that clear to you? Okay. So I think this is sufficient. Next, now we are going to talking about the contributions of moderate nationalists, that what types of contributions they did. First, the biggest contributions, right? So here we are talking about the contributions basically done by, right? Okay, right? So be ready now. Now we are going to covering about the contributions of moderates. The contributions of moderate nationalists, what types of contributions for which they are memorable in Indian modern history, and the biggest contribution was economic critique of British imperialism. Basically, what the moderates did, they exposed the economic policies of British colonial policies. They exposed that what actually you are exploiting Indians' resources in the form of mercantilism policies. That Dadabhai Naoroji, R.C. Dutt, they exposed the entire scenario through their pamphlets. Dadabhai Naoroji has written an article that is Poverty and British Rule in India, and R.C. that through the economic history of India. So all these things have been done in the interest of India, and they completely exposed the British economic scenario through their pamphlets. So the biggest contribution which was done by the moderate leaders. So this is very important. You will keep generally from here prelims and mains questions are asked. So this thing you will keep in your mind. And what the next? The early nationalists, who were the moderate leaders, like the most important Dadabhai Naoroji, who is also considered as the grand old man of India, and R.C. Dutt, right? And Dinsha Vacha and others carefully analyzed the political economy of British rule in India and put forward the economic exposure. They exposed the real face of Britishers. They exposed the real face of Britishers, that what actually you are doing with Indians. Why you are destroying the entire economic structure. You have destroyed completely Indian industries, the indigenous industries, the employment, the poverty, the extreme level of poverty and the wretched conditions of Indians you are creating. This was the main thing. Is that clear to you? And for this exposition, Dadabhai Naoroji has given a drain theory, right? And this drainage of wealth from India to England, this drain theory basically, this was unilateral. This was unilateral. Unilateral means in a single direction only, right? In a single direction means only the wealth is going to England, but no return is coming to India. There was no return for this, okay? And this drain theory was going to England in terms of home charges, right? And they used the Indian revenue to pay salaries for the high officials who were working in England. That's why, but they were eating from India's revenue. So this was the main point. You will keep all these things in your mind so that you can attempt, right? So mind should be focused and multidimensional. You have to work on your approach, right? So UPSC is totally work on the approach, whatever you will face, right? And in that time, how you will utilize your contents, how you will utilize your mentality. So through cool mentality, you have to work on this, right? Thank you. Basically, these are the main thing. Next, what types of opposition basically made by them? They opposed that transformation of basically self-sufficient Indian economy into a colonial economy. When I have taught you the economic history of India or the economic policies of India, definitely I told you about the transformation of Indian economy, that Britishers' policies transformed the Indian economy to a colonial economy from a self-sufficient economy. Means they did quite opposite thing. A supplier of raw materials and foodstuffs, means where India is considered only, where all the colonies, including India, are supposed to furnish raw materials and just to serve as a market for the manufactured products, right? So in this way, and an importer of finished goods and the field of investment for British capital. And the moderates were able to create an all India public opinion that British rule in India was the major cause, and they have soon realized that the main reason behind the economic backwardness of India is this British rule, right? And that's why they focused on the overthrowing of British rule. Right? Next. They contributed to mitigate the deprivation, means they just wanted to decrease the problems faced by the India's economic system. Characterizing Indian life, the early nationalists demanded severance of India's economic sufficiency to dependency to Britain and development of an independent economy, right? So they just wanted the involvement of Indian capital and enterprises. That's why they focused on the investment. They always try to establish or try to invest through Indians capitalist. And what the early nationalists do, means moderates did, they have started demanding reduction in land revenue, abolition of salt tax, because from 1888, from 1882, in 1882, Britishers abolished, made it a punishable offense that if any Indian will manufacture salt, it will be a crime. It will be a punishable offense for Indians, right? And from 1882, Salt Act was imposed, and in this act, Indians were prohibited from manufacturing law. And later, this Salt Act was broken by Gandhi ji in Salt Satyagraha, in Dandi March, through Dandi March, right? So that's why that moment was so popular, the international media covered that thing. So here, right? So this SALT Act means British monopoly was established. British monopoly was established of manufacturing salt, right? So these were those things. And next, plantation labor, reduction in military expenditure means reduction in defense. Next, encouragement to modern industry through tariff protection and direct government aid. That government should provide granted aids to protect government industries, Indian industries, indigenous industries, handicrafts, etc., cottage industries, so that employment could be managed, right? So all these things, these were the basic demands, although these are very significant in their demands, but British government was not at all happy to accept all these, not accept, even to consider them. They were not even ready to consider for them, right? For these demands. Next, the constitutional reforms and propaganda in legislature means what types of things were done by right? Legislative councils in India had no real official power till 1920. Means there was no participation of Indians till 1920s. And work done in them by the nationalists helped the growth of national movement. For example, the Imperial Legislative Council will later explain in the upcoming things. The Imperial Legislative Council means parliament, just like Lok Sabha in today's. Imperial Legislative Council constituted by the Indian Councils Act 1861, and here it was made that Indians will be included in the legislative affairs too. Means Indian can participate in the legislative, but Indians were included in the legislative affairs only as a non-official members, and non-official members means nothing. Means officials members were considered only the Britishers, but non-officials will be considered Indians, right? And they have nothing to do much about, because they didn't have, because the non-official member is not allowed to speak, to vote, or to debate on any matters. They are just supposed to sit briefly. So this was the thing basically done by the Imperial Legislative Council Act 1861, and it was an important body designed to disguise official measures, right? A representative body, but Indian members were few in number. In the 30 years from 1862 to 1892, only 45 Indians were there. Only 45 Indians were nominated to it, and most of them being wealthy, landed, and with loyalist interests. And those were wealthy, having land, means big landlords, and loyal. They were loyal to Britishers, right? So in this way, these things were done, right? Next, and only a few political figures and independent intellectuals like Sayyid Ahmad Khan, Kristodas Pal, V.N. Mandlik, K.L. Nulkar, and Ras Bihari Ghosh were among these nominated. So these were those members who were among the nomination, right? They were nominated for the legislative affairs, right? And from 1885 to 1892, the nationalist demands for constitutional reforms were centered around. That's why this agenda was also included in the demands of Congress, that they will demand the Indian participation even in the legislatures too, and they got inspiration from American Revolution. When I will teach you American Revolution, definitely I will teach that in American Revolution, Americans gave a slogan that if no participation, if no representation in legislative affairs, no representation, no taxation. Then why we are paying tax, right? First, expansion of councils. So you should expand your councils, and if councils will be expanded, then definitely Indians will be given participation so that Indians can get participation. Next, reform of councils means more powers to councils and especially greater control over finances, right? And in the Indians must be endowed some financial powers too. Is that clear to you? Right? Next. And what the contribution? The early nationalists work with long-term objectives of a democratic self-government. This was also a very good demand. And their demands for constitutional reforms. Constitutional reforms means some reforms, structural reforms. Structural reforms mean reforms in structure, in the system, like in your constitutional reforms. System reforms means reform in judiciary, reform in civil services, reform in councils, reforms in government sectors, in economic policies, means something, reforms in policy parameters. That is called constitutional reforms, and they were meant to have been considered in 1892 in the form of Indian Council Act, right? And these reforms were severely criticized at Congress sessions, where the nationalists made no secret of their dissatisfaction with them, right? So definitely their working style, their working culture was undoubtedly beyond appreciation, but Britishers were not cooperating with them, right? Because these parameters, these methodology can be used only with the with some lenient structure, but they could not, they were totally unable to understand their real character, their real face, right? Next. And they demanded control over budget. The power to vote and amend the budget. These were two demands. The power to vote, because they don't have the power to vote. Means Indians were included in legislative affairs or in legislatures as non-official members. And non-official members means no power. They were nominated as non-official members, right? And they were slogan no taxation without representation, right? And this slogan was inspired by American Revolution. American Revolution. And the scope of constitutional demand was widened. And Dadabhai Naroji, 1904, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, 1905, and Tilak, 1906, demanded self-government on the lines of self-governing colonies of Canada and Australia. Means they demanded self-government. And this is also called dominion status. Right? Dominion status means at the central, Britishers will remain at the central position, but they will grant to Indians to form their own governments and they can formulate their own policies, and Britishers will not do any interference. Right? But Britishers were but Indians were not allowed to do so. Right? Now we are moving next. And leaders like and many leaders like Firoz Shah Mehta and Gokhale put government policies and proposals to severe criticism. This is also constitutional methodology that they have started criticizing Britishers' policies. And the British had intended to use the councils to incorporate the more vocal among Indian leaders, right? The nationalists were able to transform these councils into forums to ventilating popular grievances or for exposing the defects of an indifferent bureaucracy. So on the platform of these forums, they have started exposing the corruption which was prevailing in the bureaucracy and for criticizing government policies, proposals, raising basic economic issues, especially regarding basic public finances, right? So all these things were basically targeted by the early moderates. And in this way, they have expanded, they have enhanced the political stature and built a national movement while undermining the political and moral influence of imperialist rule. They have started some moral pressure on Britishers. They became successful to a large extent, although it was not a big success in terms of overthrowing the system, but it played an important role. And this also had been generating anti-imperialistic sentiments. This was also the big. Among the public, means public became politically conscious. Political and nationalist consciousness immersed in public. But at the same time, the nationalists failed to widen the democratic base of the movement by not including the masses, especially women, and not demanding the right to vote for all. So all these demands have been started on this platform of Congress. Now they have also started campaigning for the general administration reforms too, right? Because there was Indianization of government services, economic grounds that British civil servants got very high emoluments, means their salaries were very high, and Indians would be more economical. But the Indians bureaucrats were getting less. And on political grounds, salaries of British bureaucrats were remitted back home and pensions paid in England and all drawn from Indian revenue, and this is called home charges. Right? When they got retirement and went to England, still they were getting their pensions from the Indian revenue. So Congress demanded that their pensions must be stopped. And if you want to bear that burden, so you bear that burden on the English treasury, right? Don't put this burden on Indian revenue, because Indians were facing already big financial crisis, right? And this amounted to economic drain of national resources, right? And that's why Dadabhai Nauroji exposed the drainage theory. Right? Next. And what are on the moral grounds? Indians were discriminated. Racial discrimination was there. Racial discrimination, and call for separation of judicial and executive functions. There must be a separation between judiciary and executive, and criticism of an oppressive and tyrannical bureaucracy, and the type of the level of corruption which was prevalent in the bureaucracy was at a very condemnable situations, right? And expensive and time consuming judicial system, it is still exists in India, right? Criticism of an aggressive foreign policy which resulted in annexation of Burma, attack on Afghanistan, and suppression of tribals in Northwest, and all costing heavily for the Indian treasury, right? So you are fighting war for your interest, and the cost is being paid by Indian revenue, right? So it's burden on us, because that Indian revenue system was made up of the taxation which we are paying, right? So in this way, you can't overlook all these things. So in this way, you will keep these things in your mind. Next. Call for increase in expenditure, that you should decrease expenditure on defense and civil administration. Instead, you should increase on the welfaring like health, sanitation, and education. These are the must thing, especially elementary and technical irrigation works and improvement of agriculture. So this was the biggest demand done ever by early moderates. And agricultural banks for cultivators. They demanded for the agricultural banks, and demand for a better treatment for Indian labor abroad on the basis, and who were facing racial discrimination. They should get some extra facilities, right? So these are the general demands I am just explaining, right? And nothing is complex or difficult here. These are very simple things. You can easily crack all these things, right? For example, protection of civil rights means what demands were did by early moderates for the protection of civil rights, right? Civil rights means social rights, right? Civil rights included the right to speech, thought, association, and a free press. And in this way, they have started campaigning for nationalist, modern democratic ideas, and soon they started defense of civil rights. It became later integral part of freedom struggle, right? And it was due to increased consciousness that masses also joined Indian freedom struggle, right? And here Tilak and several other leaders and journalists were also get arrested by Britishers due to prevailing the thoughts of freedom of speech and expression. Is that clear to you? In 1897, and at the arrest and the Nattu brothers without a trial. So problems were there. This was the British rule. Now we are presenting an evaluation. This is most important, most relevant, most crux of this chapter, right? The early nationalists did a great deal, definitely great deal, to awaken the national sentiments. Even though they could not draw the masses to them, they represented the most progressive forces of the time. And they were able to create a wide national awakening of all Indians. This was the biggest, having common interest and the need to rally around a common program against a common enemy, and above all the feeling of belonging to one nation, means national integration, a sense of brotherhood. All these things were injected by the early moderates to Indians, and nationalist sentiments were aroused among masses. In this way, they paved, or they prepared a ground. They laid a foundation for upcoming national freedom struggle in India. So we can't deny that they didn't do nothing. No, we can't deny their role, but we could not overlook the efforts, big efforts which they made, and later these things became foundational values for the upcoming national movement when Gandhi will enter into Indian politics. Is that clear to you? Right? And the next very important thing, they exposed exploitative character of colonial rule, right? And undermining its moral foundations, and their political work was based on hard realities, right? They were not on the shallow sentiments like religion, etc. Means their base, like economic exposure, they were able to establish the basic political truth in the interest of Indians, and they created a solid base for more vigorous, militant, mass-based national movement. So they created a mass-based movement in the year that followed. Next, they failed to widen their democratic base, but the scope of their demands was really relevant. We can't deny, we can't overlook their contributions at all, right? Now, what the role of masses? Their moderate phase, the moderate phase of national movement had a narrow social base. Why? Narrow social. This was basically, here we can say, weaknesses. Because we are evaluating now. When we are doing evaluation of something, then we should quote the strength and the weaknesses simultaneously, right? So weaknesses here, because mass was not connected with the leaders, they overlooked to some extent the role which a mass can play in the national movement. Okay, so the masses played a passive role here. The active participation of masses was not there, so they overlooked the role of mass, right? So it can be a, but instead what the Gandhi did, Gandhi utilized the power of masses. That's why he's considered as a true leader. And to gain the active participation of masses, this was can be categorized as a failure. And the fact that there were numerous civilians, divisions and subdivisions in Indian society on the basis, and that's why so many conservative ideas and all that, they were also, right, and thoughts. That's why, and the moderates felt that these heterogeneous elements had to first welded into nation before they entered the political sphere. So the reason is that because society was divided on various thoughts and parameters, that's why it took them, it seemed that it's not possible to mobilize the masses, so it can be done later, right? That's why they fail to realize the power of masses, and that's why without political participation, the diverse elements could not together, because diversity was not included, and because of the lack of mass participation, the moderates could not take militant political positions against the authorities. And the later nationalists differed from the moderates precisely on the point, and the early nationalists represented the emerging Indian nation against colonial, right? So this was also the difference, right? And what type of attitudes of the government, basically. And the British Indian government was hostile to Congress, means negative attitudes, right? And the official attitude stiffened further after 1887, right? So this was the, it's not much big thing. So here in this way you can cover, right? And later the government adopted divide and rule policy towards Congress, right? And the officials encouraged reactionary elements like Sir Syed Ahmad Khan in this way, and government failed to check the rising tide of nationalism. So here we can quote all these things too, right? So I think this is more than sufficient for you. So thank you so much. For being with me for this nice session. Right?